Okay. All right. Now if we can up, and there we go. It moves slowly and hoppity. So I've been around incubation for almost 20 years now, and we do have over 150 companies. I think we are at 160 or so that have gone through the incubator. I also see about 100 pitch presentations a year, and not always for angel investors, but all sorts of stuff. And I'll get into that, what that is. I also judge, and I do continued education on this topic. I read books a lot, and right now I'm participating in the Venture Deals Spring 2021 course, which I will highly recommend to everybody because I'm in the middle of it and I'm learning so much. So anybody that's interested in venture capital, I highly recommend that you take this course before you approach any venture capitalists, and maybe even before you approach any angels. And why I make this distinction, we'll get into it also. And I will speak fast because I want to have a lot of questions at this end. So going through, y'all have seen the startup curve. You know, you kind of start with this idea, you get really excited, and then reality hits, and then you work your way through. And of course, I add my little back and forth squiggles usually. And then at some point, hopefully, there's a product market fit and you can scale. So I overlaid this into bubbles because that's easier for me to manage further on. So basically, what we say, you go from idea. You have this idea, you go to commitment, where you are like, okay, I'm doing this. You know, I'm going to spend time, money, resources on this and really explore it. Next phase should be validation, where you find there is a product market fit. So you can double down on everything. Product development follows that. Sometimes, you know, they go hand in hand, and it's another circle where you spin back and forth on that. And then once you have this product that actually people want to buy, you want to sell it. And then you scale your operations, are getting, you know, lean, and you do the Six Sigma on all that stuff, and then you have an exit. And I'll talk about all those different areas, especially how there is funding for each of those different stages. And one disclaimer, this is the typical, how it happens typically. So of course, there's always exceptions, and you all heard the exceptions because they're on the news. You know, there's a Facebook on the news buying an Instagram for 50 billion or whatnot dollars money, and they only had, like, I think it's the opposite. They bought it for 19 billion and had 50 employees. You know, that's really the exception, and that's why it's in the news. So this is more about what we typically see. I will explain everything on this slide, so bear with me. So also wanted to share this. This is from our friend back in the days, Bob Fick, over at the Small Business Development Center. So, you know, if you look at this, it goes from personal resources, meaning you have skin in the game, to grants, SBIR, up to strategic partners, angel investors, VC, IPO. And then on top of that is the lottery. And I believe he put that there because he knew somebody who won the lottery and started a business with that money. So just another perspective on this. We talk a lot about non-dilutive, and I can speak, non-dilutive and dilutive funding. And as you know, we also do the roadmap, and some of the feedback was people don't really know what that is. And I must admit, you know, I didn't know what that was either. So, you know, this is very laying the groundwork, as Eric said. So people are familiar with the different terminologies and there's no confusion. So non-dilutive means you do not give up any shares of your company. So it's also called equity. So when you give out equity, which basically is shares, or if you're an LLC, it's called units, but you give out, you know, ownership on your company in exchange for money coming in, then you're diluting your own ownership in the company. So founders get diluted, and non-dilutive money is just that you don't give up any equity, any shares, any ownership in the company. So it would be revenue, grants, debt, or prices. And again, I'm going to go into all of those. Oops, what just happened? the strings attached is there's always strings attached. So the reason I chose that is, even if it's free grant money, there's always strings attached, and I'll talk about all that. And then with the equity shares, I thought it was a good picture with the puzzle. It's still the whole puzzle, but there's just different pieces belong to different owners. So that's one way to look at that one. So starting with the idea, it's just yourself, maybe a couple of people, maybe, 5 people, or as with Shine, I think there's like 50 people involved or whatnot. But you have this idea and you're kind of contemplating it, and it's really free. You just spend time and effort on this. If you're a university professor, researcher person, maybe you already had received funding from NIH, NSF, or any other, research grants to develop this idea. So it can range. There can already be money attached into this. But when you then turn it into a company, then, at this point, you're still just using your own ideas and whatnot. And really your expectation for this that your startup will succeed. So then we're going over into the commitment and validation phase. And that's kind of the beginning. So the title is the beginning, the middle, and the end. So we're in the beginning phase, and typically we see self-founded, the triple F, and I heard there's a quadruple F, not sure what the other one is, and prices. So if you're self-funded, that means, and what we see is in the range of, a couple of students, one student putting in 5,000 of their own money, or even 100,000, up to 100,000 or more. If you're a research professor with a good salary, you really believe that this is working, or maybe you had an exit before, you have cash lying around, you may want to put in your own money to really make a go of that. The cost really is that maybe it's your retirement money, maybe you're putting it on a credit card and you have to pay the interest on that. And again, still the expectation is that the startup succeeds. At this point, you don't get salary because it's pretty much all your own money. So you maybe have a side hustle, maybe you have a day job that's turning into a side hustle. Those are the kinds of things that fund this at this stage. And the startup costs at this point is what it pays for, and that is you want to set up your company as an LLC or an SOC Corp. You want to secure your URL, your website domain. You want to start your market research, your customer discovery. Back in the days, you could travel to conferences and figure out if your idea has any legs on it. And maybe you want to start working on your MVP, which is the minimal viable product, to test out if there is a product market fit. The other beginning funding strategy that we often see is the triple F, which is the family, friends, and fools. I think we don't say fools anymore, but I'm still saying it because, you have to be passionate, and you may never see that money again. That one also is in the range of 5,000, and we've actually seen family and friends rounds of over $250,000. It really depends on the sophistication of the funders, what additional cost is there. So for example, in this $250,000 round, there was a lawyer involved to write up the documents. It was almost like an angel round that we'll talk about later, with the exception that this is family, which can be harder because if you lose all your family's money, they may not be happy about that, and you don't want to have Thanksgiving dinners with them anymore. So really think about, where that money is coming from and how you're dealing with that. And examples that we've seen is the grandma, the brother, the parents, the spouse, really funding that. I'm not going to say who it is, but basically one of our founders said they sent the spouse back to work. So the spouse is a nurse, and the spouse worked so the other spouse can start a company. So that is an option. Just, again, want to avoid the spousal conflict there. And then other examples are you can barter. Sometimes you can say, hey, I have a skill in this, and maybe you can get this for me. My husband is a graphic designer, so he's done a website for somebody in exchange for another service that he needed. So that's something typical we see at this phase as well. And in alpha testers, if you can get them to pay for the testing, that's fantastic. Where I can see that happening is potentially with food items. So for example, I don't know if there's a pro did that, but just really they get their product out and see how people like it, and maybe they even pay for it. So that's initial funding as well. Still the same startup costs that you're trying to cover at this phase. Moving on to prices. So perfect lead in with Brian and Amy having won the American Made Challenge second phase, and it's ready set. So they won the set phase, and that is prize money. So nuanced between a grant and prize, which is more of a technical thing. But another example is idea funding that's going on right now. A lot of you have presented to that. And prize is really, you just get the money, but you have to work for it. You have to do presentations, you have to do certain things that you have to accomplish, you have to pitch for it. So even though it's free money, meaning you don't have to give up ownership, you don't have to pay it back, there's still a deliverable in a sense that you progress in that, and that you want to show that you're doing well with this money. At this point, typically the CEO still doesn't get any money. And what the prize givers often expect is that there's some sort of economic development. So you show that there is, you will be employing people, that sometimes it's a marketing thing. If it's a law firm and they put up a prize for the McGuire students, they just want to have the name associated with that, and then people get money. And one of the most successful students I've seen using prizes as their funding mechanism, I think they raised about $200,000 in cash and services. So that was the strategy going in. They did the McGuire program, which is a year long. So within that year, they raised about $200,000 for their venture. Still the same cost that it will cover, and really have to be strategic about that, how you're doing that. So now we're going into the middle, and a lot of you are familiar with this, and that's the grants, because if you're a researcher, you get research grants, and now there's grants for the business as well. And there's not just SBI, STTR, even though we talk a lot about that, and we talk a lot about it because it is a large pool of money. It is typical for our companies to get that. I think right now at least 11 of our 46 companies have SBIR and or STTR funding. So this is definitely an area that we support you. But there's other grants as well. And that's the Arizona Innovation Challenge, which we talk a lot about, the Flint Foundation. Emma just mentioned that she received that. And then there's other foundations that may be specific to your area. There's a lot of foundations that support or have grants for medical applications, like the Michael J. Fox in Parkinson's. The Gates Foundation does all sorts of stuff all over the country, or all over the world, really. So you want to be able to look into that and see, is there any grant opportunities from any foundation that my technology, my care abouts fit in. And this is often another return on investment expectation is economic development. So they look at, is this going to employ so many people? That's what the Arizona Innovation Challenge looks at. Will you be employing just 2 people or 20 in the next year or 2? And how plausible is that? Because then we get the tax money from the income tax of those people back into our budget for the state. At this point, typically you already have set up your company, you have a small team. And so it's still a startup because you're still figuring out this really good product market fit, but you're moving over more into the product development. And that is what this money is used for. So you're setting up your company as a real company. You need more legal fees, you have marketing fees, you're still doing market research and discovery. And definitely product development at this point is what uses up a bulk of the money. And at this point, I put there sometimes the CEO gets money. So I know in grants, there's often a little bit of money set aside for the PI that's working on the grant project. But it's not a lot. It's, modest amounts. And if it's a Flynn Foundation grant, there's no money for the CEO in that. There's still the expectation that you mostly either have your own resources or you eat ramen for lunch every day, which is not healthy, but hopefully that goes over soon. So now we're getting into the angel funding. So everything before we just talked about was non-dilutive. So the prices, the grants, all this one's non-dilutive money. So now we're going into the angel funding, and that is equity. So it is dilutive funding. And a lot of times also what I hear is people say, oh, I need VC money. And I'm very much a stickler on that because there's angel money and then there's venture capital money. And even though you could technically say that angel is venture capital, but in the true sense for Anita, it's very different. Again, just a little recap, angels are wealthy individuals, and it's defined by the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, as individuals that either make over $200,000 a year in salary and expect to do the same, or as a married couple, 300,000, or they have $1 million in personal wealth, and that excludes the home. So you cannot be owning this fancy home and be considered an angel. It needs to be basically liquid cash. And they invest their own money. So Babu just mentioned, a wealthy individual. So it was this wealthy individual's money that went into Babu's company. And then there's angel groups. So like the Desert Angels, they have about 100 members, but they still all invest individually. So when we say, go to the Desert Angels and get money there, it's not that the Desert Angels invest in you, it is every individual that decides to invest. So it could be that maybe there's 3 or 4 that invest, maybe there's 10. So it's all their individual decision, which is different from a venture capital fund, which I talk in a moment. The typical range for angel funding is between 250,000 to 3 million. 3 million is really, really, really at the high end. It's more like 2 million is sometimes a stretch. And at that point, you already have to syndicate. So for example, if you go to the Desert Angels, maybe, they put together like 250, but you need 500,000. So then you need to go to another angel group and another angel group and really get that all together. And of course, we'll have many sessions about that. So this is just a brief overview. At this point, doing an angel round, there is definitely legal cost, can range anywhere between 10,000 to 25 and up. So you want to think about, if you raise this money, you also need to have money to pay for the legal cost and perhaps an accountant to get it all set up. And at this stage, sometimes you can have the CEO draw a very small, reasonable salary. So the angels want the CEO to be invested in the company, so they don't need to be scrambling to feed their family or themselves. So there could be a small salary in that. And the expectation is really money back to the investor. So even though they're called angels, it's not a charity. They want money back on what they invest. And so again, I mentioned examples are our Desert Angels here in Tucson. Phoenix has a couple of groups, but the Arizona Tech Angel Investors is the biggest one. And then there's the Tech Coast Angels, and then there's a whole bunch of angel groups. Another way, and also there's focused angel groups. So there's the Chemical Angel Network. So if you're doing chemistry, maybe you want to look at that group because they will understand your technology a lot better, and they may be, quite interested in that. Also at this level, I put family offices, which was a big epiphany for me just a few years ago that this exists. A local one here is called Diamond Ventures. So Don Diamond is a wealthy individual, and he had some extra cash available. And so he basically hired people to manage that fund. So it is a fund. but it's managed by the family, and the family often makes decisions as to where the money goes. And think about, the presidents Bush, they were wealthy with the oil, so I'm sure they have a family office. One that we interacted was called the Stetson Fund, not the hat, but back in the days, it's the grandfather now, did the IPO for Coca-Cola. And so there was some wealth in that family who helped Coca-Cola do the IPO. And so they invested it into a family fund, and then they invest in different things. And it's fascinating, it's interesting, but it kind of is more like an angel thing, because you still have to do certain things and set up the legal structure and whatnot. And oftentimes those family offices care about illnesses. So if somebody in the family has an illness, then they want to support companies that maybe are looking for cure or something like that, or any other, just something that they care about. So if you want to do research on that, just really dig in and see if there's any match to what you're doing. And then at this point, you really want to be out of the product market fit already, and you want to be in product development. So at this point, when you take on equity investment, the expectation is that you already proved the market. You already have shown that people want to buy your thing. So that is really what equity investors look at, even at the angel level. So the money will go to really, we always like this hockey stick curve, your sales grow immense. So they want to invest right at when it takes off, and then help you excel and go up on that curve. So keep that in mind. And then I also put in the corporate venture arms here. So for example, Google Ventures, Intel Capital, they at this stage kind of look at, what you got, can we go in early? Can we, really have our money help us solve a problem, and then also get money returned. So I still put that in the middle, even though that's kind of more at the end of the middle, is the venture capital. So the difference to angel investing is venture capital is actually a managed fund. So when it's called a venture capital firm, that means there's a manager or management team. They get money from all sorts of sources, and then they invest from that fund into the startups. So this is not their own personal money. This is money that they manage for someone else. And some pension funds are invested in venture capital. So, because they figure out how to balance their money, and they put a little bit in the high risk area, so they make it a little bit higher return. But the big difference is that this is really managed money. So it's very sophisticated. And it starts at 3 million, and that's really at the low end. So and we fully realizing what I just told you, there's a gap. If you need between $2 and $5 million, it's sort of a gap, and it's really challenging to find that money. But again, there's ways around it, and it's all doable. So talk to us, we'll help you figure it out. ROI expectation, very straightforward. They want money back. They give you money, and then they want more money back. That's that. So CEO at this level should get a salary. You don't want to always make that front and center, but at this level, they nothing like in the millions and billions, but 150,000 for Tucson probably seems modest at this level. Examples locally, we have the UAVC, which is the UA Venture Capital Fund. So they're at the lower range, so they've invested $1 million and up. So it's a smaller fund. And then Blue Diamond Ventures is also fun, and I'm not sure how much to invest, but then I'm sure you all have heard of Sequoia, Kleiner Perks, the Founders Fund. Those are the big hitters. They invested in Facebook and LinkedIn and PayPal and all this stuff, and those are the ones that are over the news, and they often invest much more than just the $3 million. And of course, venture capital is also worldwide, and American companies do get that. And at this point, you definitely want to have sales. You want to have proven your model, and this is really money for operation and scaling. So they want to they want for you to go from, a couple $1,000,000 sales a year to like 100 million, or a couple 100,000 users to gazillions of users. So that is what they're looking for here. I can speak. So just to hone in on that point, angel versus venture capital, there's about 400,000 angels, about 900 venture capital firms. And I must admit, this is old numbers. The latest I found on this was 2016. I'm not going to go through all this because it's in the video and I'll send out the slides, but it really compares and contrasts to you how that deal structure is. So again, when I hear, oh, we need VC money, often it's like, probably not right now, and it's a long path. And there's a lot of people that don't make it to that because it's very selective. And it takes quite a bit of doing due diligence, proving the model, proving the company to get there. All right, so fairly new, since about 4 or 5 years, is crowdfunding. That is also a funding method. And a lot of you all probably know Kickstarter. This is what we call a product-based crowdfunding. So basically, it's almost like you're pre-selling something. So you want to see, does my product have a market? So you can put it on Kickstarter and see if people want to buy it. That's the short version. The long version is it takes a lot more than that. And typically on those platforms, you already know about 90% of the people that will buy. So you have to have a large network or it's not going to work. So it's a bit tricky. Then we have the donation-based GoFundMe, and that can be really anywhere, anything, anyhow. And then also there are now equity-based platforms. But for that, you still need to do a lot of paperwork. And it's also, some of it is only for accredited investors. And a lot of what I heard just from in my circle is, if you are an accredited investor in a group, so for example, a Desert Angel, and the company has done public offerings, is what we call this at this point, they're not interested in investing anymore. And one of the biggest challenges is because you could have so many investors that instead of building a company, you're just doing now investor management. So again, could be a whole nother session. Just wanted to throw it in here that is a thing. And then other funding options, accelerators often give money for equity. Again, this is an equity deal, so you want to watch out for that. 5 to 6% is typical for about 150 to 200,000. And then there's incentives, so tax credits, R&D tax credit, angel tax credit. For that, you must have a tax liability, so watch out for that. If you expect to have no revenue, you're not going to have any tax liability, so you couldn't take advantage of the credit unless talk to your accountant about that. And the angel tax credit is not benefiting directly the company, it benefits the angel who puts the money in. But of course, you're much more an attractive company if you qualified for the angel tax credit, because then they know they can get money back and diversify their risk. Debt. So there's a Pearl just said they got a microloan. So I do have that in there. I think it's somewhere, I didn't even list them because a lot of times our companies don't get them. So I bet you, and I want to hear from Chris that I bet you it's an asset-based loan. But usually, so I put it again, idea, you have your credit card, your personal loan, you have to pay that back. Then if you have assets, a lot of our companies that are in the incubator using incubator equipment don't have assets, so they cannot do asset-based loans. IP it's a very tricky thing. I've not seen where IP is an asset for loans. And then when you have sales, you can do a whole bunch of other fancy stuff. Even SBA loans, you have to have good credit history. You have to have a business plan. So you don't just say, I have an idea and expect to get a loan. That's not how it works. And you're always on credit. They always will look at your personal credit history. So if you have anything in there, you need to clean that up. And of course, there's always payback and ideally with interest expectation. exception right now, the PPP loans and the idle loans, there's promise that you don't have to, or outlook that you don't have to pay them back. And then the exit. So a lot of times, even in the past, I'm like, why do I have to exit? Well, you do, because if you take on money from somebody, they expect money back, and only the exit will give money back. So it's really this return on cash investment. And equity-based investment, they want money back. That's as simple as that. And you get the money back either through merger acquisition, through an IPO, which is still quite rare. It depends on the industry. A private equity sale, there's nuances, not getting into that. Or you use it to have additional spin-offs that get money, and then you can pay back the original investors, or you do a buyback where you purchase back the investments shares that you gave out. It's not very common. And then grants, there isn't an exit per se, but people still want an outcome. They want to see that you make progress, that your innovation gets into the commercial place and things like that. Lifestyle business, that is what we call when you, sometimes you get a whole bunch of SBIRs and you make money, you hire people, you make a good living for yourself, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. It's just not investable based on equity. So when you have equity investors, they want money back. They don't really want to support lifestyles of other people. So that is, again, the overview, and I'm done and ready